brokers and some researchers on this call. And you're all very welcome. And it's great to hear from the people who have spent some months putting together these areas of research interest and who are highly interested in them getting well disseminated into the academic community. And we're looking for your help with that. So the order of today is going to be that it's going to be Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government who'll go first. We're about the first half an hour with them. Then we'll have the Scottish Parliament, ARIs, and we'll pass on to them. And so small amount of time for questions specifically on each at the end of each of those presentations, and a longer session at the end. So my first introduction is to Professor Richard Prager, who is the Chief Scientific Advisor for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And he's joined by Stephen Aldridge, the Director of Analysis for MHCLG. So could I pass over to Richard first?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to start by introducing myself. I'm, as has been said, Richard Prager, the Chief Scientific Advisor, MHCLG. Before joining MHCLG, I was head of the Department of Engineering at Cambridge University and academic director of Cambridge Online Education. In my role as CSA, I'm responsible for ensuring the department's policies are supported by the best science and engineering advice available, advising ministers and senior officials on science and engineering matters, and acting as head of the science and engineering profession within MHCLG. I have strong working links with the policy and wider analytical community and work closely with my colleague Stephen Aldridge, and I'll hand over to Stephen so he can introduce himself now.
Hello, it's a pleasure to join this meeting too. I'm Stephen Aldridge, Director for Analysis at MHCLG, where I lead quite a busy analytical community that's responsible for, amongst other things, statistics, production and publication, economic and social research, evidence gathering, including policy and programme evaluation, economic analysis, appraisal and modelling, and thought leadership across all MHCLG policy areas, including housing and planning, building safety, local government and local government finance, local growth and devolution, communities, and much else. I previously worked in the competition agencies, what was the Department of Trade and Industry, the Treasury and the Cabinet Office. So really pleased to be able to present our areas of research interest document with Richard, to whom I'll hand back now.
Thank you. So this is our third areas of research interest document, building on and updating our earlier documents from 2018 and 2022. It was developed quickly in the last quarter of 2024 to reflect the missions and priorities of the government. Input and comments were sought from policy colleagues, the department's executive team, and also ministerial teams. Overall, it's a shorter document than earlier versions, with illustrative questions and more emphasis on how to make contact with us. As well as being a published document on .gov.uk, the ARI can also be found in an interactive database. This database allows you to search published ARI across all organisations, and this can be done based on organisation, topics, or research fields. So next slide, please. I'll hand back to Stephen with a bit more detail.
Fantastic. So thank you. I'm going to say a bit about the analytical and research community activity within the department, and then I'm going to draw out a few areas of research interest highlighted by our RE document. Inevitably, that won't be comprehensive, but it should give a good flavour of our interests. You might be interested to know that MHCLG has around 350 analysts across the 4 analytical professions that comprise the government analyst function. That's economists, statisticians, social researchers and operational researchers. They provide strategic and practical analytical advice to ministers, senior civil service leaders and to policy and corporate colleagues across all areas of the department's business. Our analytical priorities are closely aligned with those of ministers and policy colleagues, and we also engage closely across Whitehall. Analysts are involved at every stage of the policy making cycle, including policy definition, synthesis of existing evidence on what works, appraisal and cost benefit analysis of options, monitoring and the tracking of performance indicators, and carrying out evaluation of key programs. MHCLG analysts are responsible for the production and publication of over 100 statistical releases each year, which span areas including the housing market, house building, building safety, homelessness, land use planning and land use change, and local government finance. We're also responsible for running and analysing the flagship English Housing Survey and other major surveys. Analyst input is particularly critical for new policy development, including setting out the rationale for government intervention, providing evidence on what works, appraising different options, and business case development for every spending programme, and impact assessments for all major regulatory assessments. Changes rather are within our remit too. In addition, we deliver complex and time-critical pieces of analysis for the department's business, such as the annual local government finance settlement, which determines every local authority's funding. Alongside our active in-house programme of data collection, research, evidence building and analysis, we also competitively tender new research projects to fill evidence gaps and run a comprehensive programme of long-term policy and programme evaluations. We have many evaluations underway at present, including a homelessness test and learn programme and the evaluation of what was the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, amongst others. Our evaluation activity, which spans all our key policies and programmes, is listed on the new Evaluation Task Force Evaluation Registry, and we have a strong track record of publishing our research outputs on .gov.uk. Could we go on to the next slide, please? As a department, as an analytical community, we maintain strong links with academics and external partners to share and promote the use of evidence. We support the work of the various What Works centres, including, for example, the Centre for Local Economic Growth, the Centre for Homelessness Impact, and others. We have strong working links with a wide range of universities, London School of Economics, York, Cambridge, UCL, Oxford, Sheffield Hallam, Manchester, Birmingham, and many others. And we're also well connected to the research councils and to bodies like British Academy, Regional Studies Association, the Productivity Institute, and we also have links with similar bodies overseas like the Brookings Institute in the United States. We're involved in a wide range of cross-government analytical projects, and of course we work closely with other departments, especially Treasury and Cabinet Office, DWP, Home Office, DFT, DBT, DCIT, and DESNES, so the full range. And we have an active programme of internal economic and social research seminars where we seek to share research evidence and leading edge thinking from speakers from academia, think tanks and other sectors with our policy colleagues and our analytical community. Cover the next slide, please. The areas of research interest in our ARI document need to be seen in the light of the government's missions, milestones and strategic goals. Before I go into details about some of our areas of interest, we're just very briefly reflecting on those missions, milestones and goals. So the government's got 5 core missions, as you'll be well aware: kickstarting economic growth, making Britain a clean energy superpower, taking back our streets and reducing crime, breaking down barriers to opportunity, and building an NHS fit for the future. There are also strategic goals around reducing child poverty and reforming public services, which will come up in a moment in those ARI areas of interest. And to support those wider cross-government missions and milestones, our DPM has set a number of key priorities for this department: getting Britain building, including the commitment to 1.5 million net additional homes during this Parliament; improving housing quality and security, reflected in the strengthened renters' rights legislation, for example; reducing homelessness and rough sleeping; strengthening local government, including through improved and reformed funding; delivering growth in every corner of the country, including by extending English devolution; responding to the Grenfell inquiry report, including accelerating remediation of unsafe buildings, and a particular interest of the DPM, making work pay and strengthening employment rights. Our ARI document focuses on priorities for our department, consistent with this very broad agenda, and highlights areas of research interest. Across all these areas, we're very keen to build our own evidence and learn from robust research carried out by other organisations, whether that's in the UK or internationally. Our ARI document outlines illustrative questions under each theme, and I'll draw out some of those to give you a flavour within this presentation. I stress that our areas of interest aren't totally bound by these questions, or indeed everything in the ARI document. We're always keen to learn about new thinking, innovative areas of research, and if colleagues in universities or elsewhere believe there are things that we ought to have regard to that we're missing, we're very keen to know about that. So let me start to go through some of the issues that our ARI highlights. First one is local growth. That's at the top of this slide. Driving growth across the UK is a key priority for the department, and we want the best possible evidence on what makes for effective interventions to support it. We're looking for well-grounded evidence on the key drivers of economic growth and raising living standards and how they vary between different areas. And we're also looking for the best possible evidence on the most effective interventions to drive local growth. So this effectiveness point is very, very important. Second area, as I already mentioned, is housing. We're committed to delivering 1.5 million extra homes during this Parliament. We're keen to have the best possible evidence to support that, including what can we learn from successful planning reform in this country and indeed internationally. We're keen to better understand mechanisms for capturing land value, making better and more effective use of modern methods of construction, and developing strategies to, for example, tackle empty homes or other approaches that would release more housing for people in need. And then we're keen to understand the challenges facing and barriers to improve construction industry productivity and how to overcome them. Our concern, however, is not limited to the quantity of housing. Following the Grenfell inquiry, we're committed, thirdly, to accelerating building remediation and ensuring building safety. We have good information on a lot of this from the English Housing Survey, but we're keen to learn more and more generally to ensure we have up-to-date and robust research on dwelling quality, energy efficiency and safety measures. We're also keen to have better evidence on cost-effective approaches to improving energy efficiency, reducing differences in housing quality between tenures, and much more robust evidence on the wider societal impacts of poor housing on health, well-being, child poverty and life chances, for example. Can I have the next slide, please? Fourth area is homelessness. We have a cutting-edge programme of work underway on homelessness in the department, spanning a programme of test and learn trials and a systems modelling project. But we're keen to learn more, again, not just from the UK, but internationally, about effective strategies for preventing as well as tackling homelessness and rough sleeping, supporting and assisting vulnerable groups, for example, those at risk of domestic violence or eviction, and obtaining robust data on what are the economic, social and fiscal costs of homelessness and rough sleeping for different groups. Strong, cohesive and integrated communities are a fifth area. And we're keen to have better evidence on the best strategies for fostering more integrated and cohesive communities and preferred approaches to supporting resettlement of migrants, which generate positive long-term outcomes for individuals, families and communities. Sixth really important area is the reform of local government. The department wants to make sure that local government is put on a sounder financial footing, that resources are allocated more tightly according to need, that we address longer-term financial risk in the sector, and that there is reform and improvement in the delivery of public services. Research and evidence priorities include building the evidence base on the effectiveness of prevention and early intervention, in services such as adult social care, children's social care, and other local services. Better understanding the pressures affecting local government and any evidence on effective transformation strategies, again, from international sources as well as nationally. And building the evidence based on the impact of devolution. What is the evidence that devolution improves outcomes? Can I move on to my final slide for this bit? Seventh area is making work pay. I've already mentioned this is a very high priority for the DPM. We're keen to assemble better and more robust evidence on the economic and social benefits of jobs offering higher pay, better working conditions and security, and to learn more about the wider societal impacts of making work pay. An eighth area of interest is elections. We have a team of elections analysts in the department. Engaging as many people as possible in the democratic process is a departmental goal. And the department is keen to understand the interventions that can help facilitate high levels of engagement, especially from younger people, including registering and voting. Research priorities include better understanding the potential barriers different groups face in engaging with democratic processes, including registration and voting, and learning more about the susceptibility of the population to misinformation, its impact on voting behaviour, and strategies to overcome it. And then last but not least, for me, we're keen to hear about cutting-edge data and analytical methods that academia and others are using, which could have applications in their own work, including for our policy evaluation work, assessments of impact and value for money. And increasingly, like others, we want to learn more about AI tools and how we can use them for data collection and analysis, and how they could be beneficially applied in our work to improve the outcomes in different policy areas. So there's a lot there, I realise, to take in and think about, and I've probably gone through it far too quickly, but I'll hand over to Richard to take us through the next few slides.
Thank you. We already have an active programme of engagement activities to build collaborations with academics and other experts. Ongoing engagement with our ARIs has helped colleagues in the department expand their network in the academic community. It's facilitated knowledge exchange through meetings, seminars, roundtables, and has provided a gateway for academics to share research and evidence to contribute to policy development. We've hosted fellowships and interns in which postdocs and PhD students are integrated into policy teams to share research skills, learn how to impact policy, whilst helping to build the science capability of the department. This is something we're keen to build on and to ensure new projects are centred around our refreshed ARIs. We organise policy-focused roundtables to share our own research and bring in research and perspectives from others on housing issues, local growth, and homelessness prevention. Recently, we've collaborated with the ESRC, the Economic and Social Research Council, to deliver a policy challenge workshop where we presented challenges to postdoctoral fellows based on ARI questions. The workshops were invaluable in helping us to build new relationships and discuss the evidence base behind the ARIs. They allowed the researchers to develop proposals to address some of the challenges presented and to understand the best ways to engage with our policy teams. Next slide, please. For those of you interested in engaging with the ARIs, I'd like to suggest a few things which you might consider when contacting us. Firstly, clearly specify the ARI and the specific topic you're interested in. This helps us direct your inquiry to the appropriate team. Secondly, include a brief overview of your research, highlighting key findings and objectives. This gives us a better understanding of your work and how it aligns with our initiatives. Thirdly, share links to your published papers or articles. This allows us to review your work in more detail and identify potential areas for collaboration. And fourthly and lastly, be clear about what you hope to achieve from the engagement with us. Whether you're seeking collaboration, a supporting letter for funding, or an opportunity to give a seminar, specify your desired outcome will help us to tailor our response to your needs. Next slide, please. Our ARI inquiry team will use the information that you provide to determine the most appropriate colleague to handle your inquiry. They'll let you know when they have passed on your request and follow up to see what the outcome of the contact has been. We've included some tips for engaging with us, including being clear about the relevance of your research to our policy agenda and policy makers, and being clear and succinct with your initial approach. We know from previous contact that there can be some real benefits to individuals and their organisations from contacting us, including getting our support for new bids for research funding from other organisations, helping you to demonstrate research impact, and making best use of your evidence in a policy-based setting. Collaboration can also contribute to building and enhancing connections and also helping to improve research capability, and also supporting early career academics with practical experience of collaboration. Please remember that the questions provided in the ARIs are examples only and may not be exactly aligned with your interests. We're interested in hearing from people doing any relevant research, so don't hesitate to reach out with any inquiries or proposals that align with our priority topics. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the exciting collaborations and innovations which will emerge from our new areas of research interest. And as was said at the beginning, we will both be very happy to take a few questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard and Stephen. And if anybody would like to ask a question, they can also raise their hand or enter it into the chat. And I think we've got knowledge brokers on this call who may have previously collaborated with ARIs. So Britta Turner, would you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much. I'm Britta Turner from Durham University. I was reading your list of the new areas of research interest earlier, and I was really interested to see that. So in Durham, I've been working with the local authority, Durham County Council, to try and launch their first set of areas of research interest. And you'll not be surprised to find that there's a lot of overlaps, and some of the sort of sub points that you've got are pretty much word by word also questions that they're curious about. And so my question is really about, I'm looking at all your engagement activities. Have you got experience of, or are you thinking about the kind of collaboration opportunities between different, local government, increasingly also regional governments, working on this kind of building areas of research interest? And I'm wondering if you've sort of had any experience of working across different levels of government with these questions.
Shall I take that, Richard?
Yes, fine.
Yes, we do have experience of this. Though I should say straight away that whilst we do work very closely with actually the devolved governments, the mayoral strategic authorities and local authorities, obviously our ability to engage with all of them in detail on these issues is inevitably constrained. It's just too big an undertaking. Having said that, especially in relation to the major authorities, I mean, we've got very close relationships with it now, with a number of the combined authorities, for example, working with them on their analytical priorities, and indeed involving them in some of our research projects. So to give a concrete example, some of the mayoral combined authorities are very interested too in the whole question of what impact does or will devolution have on outcomes we're concerned about. And one of the combined authorities got a very interesting research project that is going to seek to model the outcomes and impacts of devolution. That's something which we're very interested, because we want to make sure that we cover devolution within our programme of policy and programme evaluation. So where areas of clear joint interest and wider significance come up, we will work very closely with different authorities. In other cases, I might lever support from others to help bring our expertise to bear. So, for example, I mentioned that we have very close working relationships with the What Works centres, and two in particular that I work especially closely with, the Local Growth Centre and the Centre for Homelessness Impact, have engaged very closely with many local authorities on data, research and analytical issues. So in some cases, I may work through intermediaries to help other levels of government rather than necessarily doing it directly, or relying on members of my team to do that. But clearly, we seek to do our best to join up and share where we can. But there are others who we can bring to the party to help us too.
Thank you, Stephen. And I think as Britta is maybe also aware, there's a programme happening through UPenn, which will also support the ARI generation at local authority and combined authority level, which is of a kind of increasing interest. And we're looking to make those links as they get published across. So it may be that, again, there's a role for UPenn in linking up, but it's very helpful to have Stephen's reflections on the intermediaries like the What Works centres as necessary kind of partners in that kind of activity. Richard, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, we were involved in a series of sort of collaborations, which I think involved UPenn and the CAPE organisation based, I think, at UCL, in producing a report about academic advisors in local and regional authorities. It was published as a CAPE Insights report. So that was the main collaboration that I've come across.
Thank you. That's also a good reminder to have a look at that. I think for the interest of time, we're going to move on. If it's okay, I'll just read out Irene's, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, question in the chat. It was a very good and clear presentation, and they're asking, would you consider proposals for ideas that would be suitable for fellowships? And if so, when around the year and through which potential funding stream? So I know that the UKRI Policy Fellow Programme is open at the moment, and I think that's a closing date in July for sort of positions of up to 18 months. And I'm not sure whether MHCLG have got a project within that. I think that's one of the main routes to actually have an academic sort of fellowship that involves working in a government department, whereas also there are kind of fellowships that are academically funded universities, but where it might be relevant to explore having responded to an ARI that comes from MHCLG. So either Stephen or Richard want to say, yeah, Richard, did you want to come in on that?
Well, to start with, we definitely engage in the UKRI scheme, and we have 2 fellows at the moment, and we will consider whatever is appropriate in the coming around, depending on the fit of the people who apply. We've also recently hosted Royal Society Policy Associates. We also have a vigorous program of interns, of more junior individuals from universities. So, I mean, there may be other schemes that I haven't remembered that Stephen can also highlight, but essentially, my perspective is that we generate a great deal of mutual benefit through these types of sort of collaborative placements where people come and do stuff in the department, and the quality of applicants is extraordinarily high, and I think that they're enormously beneficial both to us and to the individuals involved.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. Those are useful pointers. Well, I'm going to ask us now to move on to the Scottish Parliament new areas of research interest, and then we'll have some time for questions on both at the end. So it's Dr Dan Barlow who's joining us, who's on secondment from Edinburgh University to the Scottish Parliament, and it's great to see parliamentary engagement with the idea of areas of research interest as well. I know this is something Dan's worked on for quite some time to get these launched from the Scottish Parliament. So I'm going to hand over to Dan now, who can tell you more about it.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nikki, and thanks for the opportunity to chat to you all about the Scottish Parliament's areas of research interest. As Nikki said, so I'm funded by ESRC, and I'm employed by Edinburgh University on behalf of Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling and Strathclyde universities, and ESRC are funding this role in the Scottish Parliament and an equivalent role in Wales and Northern Ireland to help the legislators get access to expertise from the research community. And one strand of that of my work has been looking at ARIs. So I'm just going to move my slides on. A little bit of context around academic engagement in the Scottish Parliament, and then I'll talk about areas of research interest, the context for why we've developed them, how we're applying them, and what the current live ARIs are, and a few tips for the research community in how to engage with the ARIs, and I'll share my thoughts about what our next steps are and how we're going to evaluate the ARIs. So the first thing is, in terms of academic engagement, the Scottish Parliament has a myriad of mechanisms that we use to engage with the research community at the moment. So we run PhD internship schemes, which is part of a UK-wide UKRI scheme. We host fellowships, so we do both kind of topic-based fellows. We also put out an open call where we invite academics to suggest themes that they think should be appropriate for the Scottish Parliament to support a fellowship on. We encourage the research community to submit written responses to calls for evidence when the parliamentary committees are looking at particular topics or areas of work or pieces of legislation. And we produce guidance to support the research community in how they go about providing responses to the Scottish Parliament. We obviously draw on research experts heavily as part of the process of committees taking evidence on particular topic areas. And my role is to help signpost and identify where research expertise is and suggest to committees who they might want to take evidence from as part of their scrutiny work. We often host breakfast seminars, and as part of that, we regularly bring in academics to talk about issues in a kind of Chatham House format, which enables the Parliament to have a discussion of issues that they may be on the parliamentary radar, they may relate to a piece of work a committee is doing, or they may not yet relate to something the Parliament is looking at, but something that in the research team in the Parliament we think is an important area where parliamentarians would be likely to be interested in hearing more from some research experts on a topic area. Like other legislators, we often have academic advisors. Sometimes advisors are appointed to support a particular inquiry that a committee is doing. Sometimes an advisor is appointed to cover a kind of period, so maybe 3 or 4 years. So in the past, I've been a climate advisor to several of the Parliament's net zero committees, providing kind of support for them around the topic area and helping them access that network of expertise in the research community that way. And we draw on research experts too to support, for example, guest blogs. There's a myriad of ways that we already engage with the research community. And as part of that, we have a network, and that's something that anyone who is interested in can sign up to. I'll share a link later, but it enables any member of the research community to sign up to get a monthly update. And as part of that, we will share what the opportunities are in the Parliament for people to contribute, what the Parliament's going to be scrutinising, what different committees are going to be working on. And it's also a mechanism by which we often reach out to see who has expertise in a particular area. So it could be, I've used this in the past when I've been trying to support colleagues draft a response to a member on a particular topic, say, who's got some expertise on sustainable construction that we can tap into here to understand an issue more. We've used it to identify themes that a committee may wish to consider as part of its inquiry. So we've, for example, done an invitation around natural capital finance, when we invited the research community to suggest themes they thought that the committee should be considering as part of their scrutiny of that topic. And we've also used it more broadly to, for example, explore the links between the remit of a particular committee and climate. And one aspect of my work has been trying to highlight the links that exist between the variety of subject committees in the Scottish Parliament and climate. And in doing that, I've done calls out to the research community to identify, for example, who's working on issues that link education and climate together, and then pull together blogs based on that signposts where there is research expertise that a committee could draw on if they so wish to follow that up further. So a variety of ways that we engage. A little bit more around kind of, I suppose, the context for what I'm trying to do in my work. So I've looked back at how extensive the academic community is currently engaged with the Scottish Parliament. And just as a snapshot, I've looked at the database, which probably doesn't capture every entry, but it captures the majority of witnesses, as we understand, that have given evidence to the Parliament over a period of time. And from that database, I identified that less than 6% of all the witnesses that the Parliament heard from were from the academic community. So that strikes me as quite small. The majority of them are from Scotland, but a good group from the rest of the UK and relatively few from international. You don't need to read the detail of this, but unsurprisingly, it shows that perhaps we hear most from witnesses that are based at the biggest academic institutions in Scotland: Glasgow, Edinburgh, Strathclyde, Aberdeen, and to a lesser extent Stirling. But there are often witnesses that come from the smaller institutions in Scotland, and of course from institutions based elsewhere in the UK. I also looked as a snapshot at how extensively had the research community been engaged in supporting the Parliament when they scrutinised versions of what we call in Scotland a kind of climate change plan. So the government is required to produce a detailed plan every 4 or 5 years, which says how does it plan to meet the emission reductions targets that are set in law. And as part of that plan, a draft has been provided to the Parliament to enable a period of parliamentary scrutiny. Typically, multiple committees will look at those drafts, and so far we've had 3 kind of plans that have been scrutinised by the Parliament, and those have involved scrutiny by, I think, at least 4 committees on each occasion. So quite a lot of evidence associated with scrutinising that draft plan. But from my kind of research drawing in to identify, well, how extensively was the research community engaged? For me, quite surprising, particularly in the most recent their climate change plan update, to see only 3 submissions from the research community. And I think in total there were probably like 90 or 100 submissions across all the committees that scrutinised that plan. So to me, it feels like relatively low levels of engagement from the research community on topics where we know the research community has a huge amount to offer and there's a huge amount of expertise that we could benefit from. Another aspect of my work is thinking about the diversity of who the Parliament hears from in terms of their contributors from the research community. And the Parliament itself has done work looking at gender and identified itself that parliamentary committees tend to rely on the usual suspects when inviting witnesses. There's also been academic work that's been done looking at who the Parliament hears from the academic community, and recommendations made several years ago from research produced by Mark Geddes and Daniel Bezic that suggested that the Scottish Parliament should be diversifying the academic base, and that there's a kind of perception of a reliance on certain parts of Scotland and established scholars. And alongside that, the Parliament itself has agreed that they want to strengthen their work around participation, diversity and inclusion. And it did publish guidance about how it expects organisations to think about this issue when they are providing submissions or when they are responding to requests, for example, someone to give evidence. The Parliament itself has also hosts a kind of witness diversity survey. So it tries to capture information on diversity of all those people that give evidence, albeit so far the response rates are relatively low. So we actually don't have a very comprehensive analysis of the diversity of the academic community that is engaging with the Scottish Parliament. So my role, as I mentioned, is therefore funded with kind of 2 strands. One, to try to strengthen how the Parliament accesses research expertise, particularly focused on climate. And 2, in the process of strengthening that, whether we can diversify who is engaging with the Parliament and share lessons and learnings from that with other legislators. And at the same time, to provide a bit of strategic support for the 4 academic partners particularly, but much of the things that I do and the materials and guidance I produce is available to all academic partners to support the academic community to engage more effectively with the Parliament. So this is where ARIs come in for me, early on in the role, I identified and was aware of work that had been done in other legislators, as well as work that had been done by government departments on ARIs. And so we agreed that we would pilot use of areas of research interest in the Scottish Parliament with a view to trying to use them to identify research, expertise, contacts in the academic community that we could use in the Parliament to think about, to draw on to inform questions or issues that a committee may wish to consider. For colleagues in the research team in Parliament who do a huge amount of work drafting research briefings, producing background papers for committees, for them to be able to draw on the insights, the research insights better, and have a better network of people that they could tap into and reach out to in the research community when they are drafting those materials. And also to enable us to be kind of better placed to identify who the potential expert witnesses may be when we can make those suggestions to committees as part of their scrutiny work. We have a bigger and stronger awareness and understanding of the expertise that's out there. So we've now piloted a system, or we've piloted ARIs on the Scottish Parliament website, and very much tried to learn from the approaches that have been used in other legislators to do this. And we have developed what I think is a fairly straightforward system. It's based and hosted on the Scottish Parliament website. It uses Microsoft Forms as the mechanism. It's very easy to complete. We're not asking for huge amounts of detail. We're really asking for you to identify on the particular topic area that each ARI is, if you have expertise in that topic area, to signpost a couple of links to things work you might have done, reports you might have published, to highlight if you've got further work coming up, to ask you if you'd be willing to engage further. So the feedback so far from those that have contributed is that this takes 5 or 10 minutes to do. So we're hoping that's going to make for a mechanism that is very easy for the research community to draw on. I'm also hoping that because we're using effectively a sort of web-based link, it's something that is easy to be circulated around networks, and we appreciate the work that UPenn have done to sort of share and socialize the ARIs so far. So hopefully it makes it easier to distribute these ARIs and make more people aware that they exist. We're also hoping that it can help in diversify who is contributing, including the institutional reach. So I'm hoping it's going to enable us to reach more institutions, including securing more input from elsewhere in the UK. So we're less focused on solely Scottish input, but also in terms of career stage. We are aware that sometimes it's intimidating for early career researchers to engage. We also know that sometimes they have limited capacity and time. We also know that there are concerns about not knowing the process and mechanisms to engage. The evidence from my discussions with other legislators that they'd had good responses from early career researchers. So I'm hopeful that by using ARIs, we can diversify who in the research community is responding to the Scottish Parliament. And the final strand is that I'm also using it as a way of collecting more information on the kind of diversity of those that engage, including protected characteristics, but also things like the institutions and career stage, so that we can build up a picture over time of who is engaging with the Scottish Parliament and whether there are particular gaps, and whether we can then use that to better target some of our kind of requests from groups that are less well represented. So the initial ARIs that we're piloting all relate to the scrutiny of the next draft climate change plan. So the Parliament is expecting to see that this autumn. We're anticipating this could be late September, early October. It's a statutory requirement in the government to produce this, and there's a formal process that requires the Parliament to have over 100 days of time to scrutinise that. We anticipate that multiple committees will be involved in that. And that plan is likely to relate to many key sectors where there are emissions, for example, agriculture, transport and waste. But it's also likely to draw heavily or relate significantly to aspects of work around kind of cross-cutting issues like the implications for just transition. The plan this time is required to set out much more detail on the costs and benefits of the policies. So there are many areas where we anticipate the research community will be well placed to contribute expertise in supporting that scrutiny. So the two ARIs that are currently on our website. So in discussion with colleagues in the research team, we've initially identified two particular research topics where colleagues in the research team felt that we don't know much about the evidence base that's out there in the research community. We also don't know much about who in the research community is working on these topic areas. So these two ARIs relate to one, waste management and resource use. And the second strand is around regional and sectoral employment implications of a just transition. So on waste and circular economy, we're trying to understand more about the insights and expertise available from anyone working on aspects of how to cut emissions from avoiding, reusing, reducing materials, from decarbonising waste treatment and disposal, and from issues around waste and resource use processing capacity and infrastructure, and also some of the links between waste and resource use policy and well-being and just transition. And on regional and sectoral employment implications, we're particularly keen to understand more about any work that's been done which highlights information on what the potential timescales might be for the changes in employment as a result of this just transition. Any information on what the economic implications might be of these changes, and also any research that relates to what does this mean for skills and training. So those are the two current ARIs. You don't need to read the detail of this, but my initial analysis from responses, these have been live now for about 2 months. I think we've had about 40 responses across both of them so far, which is kind of in line with what I was expecting and kind of in line with the feedback from other legislators who've used ARIs. And what's encouraging to me is we are getting significant responses from early career researchers, which is great. We're getting significant input from institutions which are based outside of the UK. I'm particularly keen to note that we have had many responses from people who've never engaged with the Scottish Parliament before. So over half of the responses for each of these ARIs have come from people who've never had any engagement with the Parliament. So that's really encouraging to me. So any kind of tips initially, if obviously we really appreciate any help in you circulating this to colleagues and sharing with colleagues you think it might be relevant to. But my tips for engaging is that we think it's really quick, straightforward to do. So we really don't think it takes more than 5 or 10 minutes time for someone in the research community to put in a response. Recognise that sometimes it might be daunting if a researcher sees a list of questions and thinks, well, my research only relates to one aspect of that, but that's totally fine. We're totally happy to hear from someone whose research focuses just one element of this work. That's great. Just highlight what that research is. We can pick our way through who has expertise in different areas. So I wouldn't want that to put people off. My other tip, and I mean, this aligns closely with what you've heard from the speakers earlier, is really interested in hearing more about what the findings. So we're less interested obviously in what the methodology was of your research, but really care, what did you find and what does it mean for policy? Really keen to get input from those working at all career stages, and really keen to hear from kind of all research institutions, small and large, anywhere in the UK, beyond the UK. All that input is really, would be hugely kind of welcome in the Scottish Parliament. So the next steps, I need to do some work to review and evaluate these once we close the current ARIs. Obviously, we'll be drawing on the submissions over the summer to support research colleagues and to support the committees in their preparation of the materials which will enable them to scrutinise this plan in the autumn. I'm very keen to put some more ARI calls out, so I would encourage you to if you're interested, sign up to the Scottish Parliament Academic Network. I've got a link on the slide coming up, but that will ensure that you keep informed of further ARIs, because I would like over the summer to issue some more ARIs. And then we'll also have a discussion in the Parliament about the wider rollout and application. So this is the pilot, and it's agreed this focuses on these ARIs initially focused on climate, but there is an interest in the Parliament as to whether this is a mechanism we should use more widely across all policy areas. Final slide. So any help in circulating, promoting the ARIs would be brilliant. Plan to close the current 2 ARIs in early June. And any feedback, if you do at any point or pick up from colleagues, any feedback on the nature of how it was to engage, would really welcome any comments on the form, any comments on your experience. If anyone that does respond, do let me know, because we can tweak, we can change, we can edit our systems, edit our process. We're trying to learn, we're trying to kind of pilot this with a view that we can strengthen it. So all feedback welcome. And finally, I would like to thank Rob Davis at Closter and Chloe Corbin, Zenith Research, because both of them have really helped me in setting up the Scottish Parliament ARIs. So with that, I'll stop and very happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Dan, and thanks for giving that different context for running ARIs in the legislature. And I think just at the end there made the point that the way they're being piloted, and understandably probably with the pace of sort of scrutiny in a parliamentary setting, is that they're open for a period of a few months, which is a difference from the central government ones, which tend to be refreshed every couple of years and a sort of sustained responsibility to that department and so on. So I think that's one of the reasons why the engagement tool is also slightly different and so on. But I think you've got a flexible format there that can help get new researchers on the radar for Scottish Parliament. Were there any questions or reactions to what Dan has presented? I mean, I was going to ask you a little bit more, Dan, about the, I might go so you don't hear so much from me. Rhiannon, Rhiannon is asking, are there other knowledge exchange managers for other policy areas other than climate change? Because that's what you're doing. Do you have responsibilities that reach into other areas, or what are the plans for that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the three roles that ESRC funded are slightly different. So there's the roles in Wales and Northern Ireland don't have a particular policy area attached to them. So they're generic, they could work across all policy areas. In the Scottish Parliament, it was agreed initially that this would focus on climate, because I think the sense was that that would help in building support and traction in the Parliament for strengthening our engagement with the research community if we aligned it to a particular topic area. So there aren't any other colleagues who cover other policy areas in the way that I'm doing, but there are, of course, colleagues in the Scottish Parliament research team who cover all the policy areas. And as part of their research roles, they do engage with the academic community. They just don't have as much capacity as I've been fortunate to have in spending so much time thinking about the mechanisms and tools that we can use. So the Parliament will have to make a decision at some point as to when my post ends at the end of the ESRC funding, whether how it wishes to continue to strengthen its engagement with the academic community.
That's good to know. I was going to and please do also be thinking of questions that would work for MHCLG as well as for Scottish Parliament. I also wanted to ask you, Dan, I know this is an interest of Laura, our network manager on the call as well, is this question about diversity of evidence and whether the Scottish Parliament is sort of reflecting on, what it misses out on if it doesn't have the diversity of evidence, and if there are kind of good practices, or, this was better, we got a better outcome or a better piece of scrutiny because we heard from a more diverse set of researchers amongst others. That kind of, there's a sort of moral case for diversity and a sort of effective scrutiny case for it, and I wondered how that had been reflected on.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the Parliament has done a lot of work in the most recent parliamentary session looking at how it engaged with the public and communities, and they've set up a specific team to strengthen how the Parliament engages with members of the public and the communities, and as part of that, how they integrate aspects of diversity and the benefits of hearing from a range of voices. I think the work that we've been doing on academic engagement hasn't got as far or hasn't progressed that as much as other aspects of work in the Parliament. So I think in some ways it feels like we are still at an early stage in having discussions in the Parliament about the benefits of research evidence and the culture of accessing evidence from the research community. So if I'm honest, I don't think we have had very many detailed discussions around at that level of why it's useful to hear from different voices in the research community. But what we do hear often is feedback, which is from members and from committees, that they acknowledge that it's often the same voices, and they sometimes are disappointed to not hear from new voices, and they are keen to have new people and new faces. So definitely pick up a desire and a willingness to have a broader range of people from the research community feeding into that scrutiny process.
Great. There's a question from Victoria Lee in the chat. I don't know, Victoria, did you want to switch your camera on and give your question? Or I can, oh, you're not on a machine. Oh, with the mic or camera. I'm very happy. So this is a good question about the interest MHCLG has from academics from devolved nations. I can anticipate Stephen was going to have a positive response to this, but Stephen, what's your response to engagement with academics with evidence from the devolved nations?
Yeah, most definitely. But before I go on to the specifics of the question, it may be just worth saying that one of my other responsibilities, I chair something called the UK-wide Evidence and Analysis Steering Board. And this has existed now for a couple of years. And its purpose is roughly every 3 to 4 months to bring together analysts across the 4 nations of the UK to do deep dives into issues of common interest, in order to share our understanding of the challenges we face, the drivers, what we've learned in the 4 nations works and doesn't work, and generally to serve as a vehicle for sharing knowledge and understanding of issues in which we've got a mutual interest. And product of that is usually an agreed UK-wide analysis of the issues, which, for example, can be available to ministers of the 4 nations when they meet in the various bits of machinery that bring together ministers across the 4 nations. I and my team engage regularly, in any case, with academics across the UK. To give you some examples, I've for many years been very close to University of Glasgow. The UK Collaborative Centre for Housing Evidence is based there, but I've known many of the academics at Glasgow who work, for example, on housing and urban regeneration issues for many years, and we work very, very closely with them. And similarly, we have close relationships with the academics at the Heriot-Watt University, where there's a particular centre of expertise in homelessness, and we regularly involve them in our work. Indeed, the analysts there help develop the model that we use in our own work to project and understand future trends in homelessness. I was doing some work recently on new towns, and I discovered that there was a team of academics, again at Glasgow University, had just completed a major project on Scottish new towns, and I engaged with them, brought them into our work. So across the piece, we work very, very closely with Scottish academics, and indeed I see a reference here in another question to Scotland's tax strategy. Through my contacts with the University of Glasgow, I got to know Graham Roy, who's the chair of the Scottish Fiscal Commission, and he's spoken at some of our events and seminars here. So we're very, very keen to engage with academics throughout the UK, and indeed do so in many of our policy areas. And one final thing is, one thing that we asked academics at Glasgow to do recently was a paper on what should we learn from Scotland, for example, and indeed other countries, about the impact of attempts to regulate the private rented sector. We were particularly focused on aspects of regulation other than regulation of rents. But given particular approach that, say, Scotland has taken, we were very keen to learn from the evidence and experience in Scotland, and that's been applied in our own work. And maybe I should say too, I've been on the advisory board of the Wells Centre for Public Policy for many years, and I know them well too. So we have very strong links across the four nations.
Great, thank you so much. That's really helpful. I wondered if David, Jack, do you want to ask your question yourself to Dan? I don't know if you have the mic or camera available.
Yeah, I've got a mic available. Camera's playing up a little bit. Yeah, Dan, thanks very much.